Hello and welcome to Magic is Real. I'm Shannon, I'm your host, and today I have with me Jennifer Foley. I received an email from Jennifer that I'm going to read to you. To preface why I have her on the show today, I'm really looking forward to speaking with her because I'm a medium and spirit communication is one of my favorite topics. And so I know we're going to have a lot to talk about, and here's why. Jennifer reached out to me and she runs her own group, her group online called Spiritual Strength. Unfortunately, Jennifer lost her husband in 2021 to suicide. And she said that since then, she's learned she can hear him. And they've been on an epic journey together across the veil. He's provided such epic evidence, it's astounding. Her husband is known as the ghost with the most around the community of there is a group that we both belong to called Soulmates in the Afterlife. And I think what's so special about what we're going to talk about is I'm a medium, right? So I give readings to people, but it's equally important to learn how to have connections with your own loved ones. And so we will talk about that. But first, I just want to say thank you so much for being here and for offering to share your story and your experience with us all. I'm so incredibly sorry for your profound loss, and also looking forward to hearing about um, the inspiring aspects of your story.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having us and giving us the opportunity to sort of share it with the audience and kind of share it with more people and get it kind of out there that you can continue these types of relationships.
Yes, and I'm going to ask you some questions, obviously, but I think it is important to because, as I said, people do come to me, and some people from the same group that we're in together come to me for comfort, and I think and I'm honored to hold space for people. It's such a sacred responsibility, and it's I hate to say favorite thing to do because it's not my favorite in the sense that I don't love that people have lost someone so close, but I love that under the circumstances, what I'm able to do can bring peace. And what I find so beautiful is that it's hard for me to read to communicate with my own loved ones because it's difficult to be objective. So I'm really excited to hear um, your experience. So I'd love to start with just kind of your background and can you tell me your husband's name because I don't know.
Yeah, it is Chris or Christopher.
Okay,
He'll go by either one. But yeah.
thank you. I'd love to start with how you met, you and Chris.
Yeah, so I had been married for 13 years prior to meeting him and kind of separated, became really independent, tried to start dating again. And I refused to get married, all of that. And there comes Chris wandering into my world. And we met via online dating, and I ignored his message for over a month and finally responded. And it took 2 dates, and we were inseparable ever since, and we still are.
Oh, I love that you said that. And can you tell us about Chris?
Yeah, so he was just quite, he still very much is, but he's quite the lightning force. Super intelligent. He was an athlete. We were like the picture of middle class America, right? The perfect family, the dog, the whole thing. And unfortunately, though, he did suffer from severe depression and PTSD that was linked a lot from his childhood. And I was aware of it, but I didn't know really how deep that sort of built up inside of him. And because our connection was so strong, I was the only person that he told what had really happened to him. He had suffered some really tragic things as a child, and he kind of let that out to me as a grown adult. And sort of through that evolution of emotions, it became too much to handle, and it was creating emotional outbursts, things to that nature that made it sort of an unsafe place for me and my teenagers. And unfortunately, I had to have him move from the home for a period of time. And it just kind of evolved, and it got to a place where unfortunately, his mind led him to believe that he should no longer be here and that we would be better off without him, which is obviously not true. But in that moment, that is the thought process that he had. Um, and through the course of his passing, my whole life got turned upside down. rightfully so. And a couple months after he passed, I started to have experiences where I was realizing that I was hearing him. And
Okay.
it kind of evolved. I was looking for any and all ways possible to reach him, almost from the day that he left the 3D world. And I was getting my own readings done to try to make sense of it, right? You're trying to grasp for anything. I was going to any and every medium that I could find that would read for me. And a good handful of them, unbeknownst, didn't know anything about me. And they all would say, he's saying that you hear him, you just don't think you do. And so that made me sort of have to step back and kind of question myself, like, am I really hearing him? What is happening? And I started really kind of paying attention to the thoughts that were happening in my head, and started clicking and making a lot of sense. And I'm now to a point, kind of like yourself, where I'm able to do it for others, which blew my mind because I'm in a very quote unquote left brain field with work. I work in finance. He worked in finance. We're about as far, I always kind of joke, not woo woo as you can get. And I was like, well, if I can do this, anyone can.
This
Um,
is
yeah.
I was just gonna say, I thank you for sharing that because I think this is something that I wanna drive home to everyone too, and I'll let you do it, but that we are all if you believe in this and you're willing to sort of learn how to do it and just I love what I guess what I'm trying to say is what you said is so big because people say, "How can I learn how to do this?" And I think my bottom line is it comes down to intention. Like you said, it's focusing on it. That's all it is.
Yes.
Then learning the difference between your own thoughts and spirit's thoughts. So I'd love to hear, yeah, what that moment was and did you sort of intentionally study how to do it or did you just kind of start to realize I guess yeah, just tell us the first time that you realized that's his voice, that's not mine, and how did you know it was his voice and not yours?
Yeah. Well, I had, was trying to figure out any way to cope with such a tragic loss, even to the point where I was trying to do what other people said, move on and try dating and uh sort of a bad coping mechanism. I went on a couple of dates and it didn't matter what date or how good or how great these gentlemen were, they would disappear after I would talk to them for a short period of time out of the blue. It would be like a great conversation, great. They would just disappear. And I was like, what is happening? Like, I don't, there's no logical progression as to why you'd have a great conversation and then someone would just fall off the face of the earth, just in a repeated fashion. So I was kind of sitting with that for a little bit, and then things just started happening. One example is I was going to my mailbox across the street, and as I was walking across the street to the mailbox, I heard, "You look cute in that blue shirt." And I looked down and I was like, why would I ever tell
Ghost.
myself I look cute in a blue shirt? Like, it doesn't make even a little sense to me. Things like that. I'd be crying and I would look in the mirror and be like, you look awful today. And I would immediately hear, no, you don't, you're beautiful. And I'd be like, what? What? I was like, what? Like, women don't say that. We
Mm.
just don't say things like that. One of the most notable was before he had passed away, he had bought me an orchid and we had a fight and I threw this orchid in the trash. Well, fast forward to once he passed away, I was in Walmart one day and they had like a whole row of orchids after you check out. And I was getting ready to go to my car. And as I'm walking out, I hear, you should get an orchid. And I stopped and I was literally arguing in my head going, I don't want an orchid. Why would I want an orchid? I was just kind of didn't understand, like, what is wrong with me? Why am I having this conversation with myself over an orchid? And I didn't get it. And it just kept bothering me. And then the next day I went back to the store and bought this orchid and it sat on my counter. And I would have a couple sessions afterward with some fairly, very clairaudient mediums, which I would consider sort of top notch in that they are able to really hear him quite well in his syntax. And he would comment on these things or say, she hears me. And that's when I was sort of overwhelmed and decided that I need to really not only pay attention to my own thoughts, but how does this work? What is happening? How does this work? How do I do this? And is he really speaking to me? Or, do I just need to go get myself evaluated at some point? Because I honestly didn't know what was happening. No one around me knew what was happening. And it just sort of led to this trickle of events where I started joining these groups. It's how I got to soulmates in the afterlife. And I started kind of doing the tools that people were teaching. And obviously, one of those things that you hear is meditation. I haven't meditated a day in my life prior to his passing. And I bought this app that has binaural beats on it, and I just sat with it. And because I paid for it, I was like, well, you're going to sit here and you're going to use it. And I did it for 3 months without a single thing. I hated it. I thought it was literally probably the silliest thing that I'd ever done. But I kept doing it because I bought this. And shortly thereafter that I started having experiences with him in meditation. And one of those was he got down on one knee and he handed me this rose. And I even journaled, I wrote it in my notebook, like handed me a rose. And I mean, I came out sobbing, right? It's a very emotional experience. I'm like, I don't know what just happened to me. About 3 weeks later, I had a mediumship session. And the very first thing that she said when she connected to him was she didn't know what she was talking about in the moment. And she said, he's saying, so you liked the rose? I was like,
I just got so many chills through my body.
he has validated a probably at least a half dozen times experiences that have happened in meditation externally through a third party that I've never told, no one could
Yeah.
possibly know. And he does that purposefully because he knows that I question it so that I know that it is real. And it has
Yep.
completely blown my mind that you can validate something that only happened in my head.
Yes. That is so true. And you also said something else that I think is important. First of all, the importance of meditation. That's everything. It's just learning to feel the rhythm of your own soul and be still with your own energy so that you know what your energy feels like versus what spirit's energy feels like. And I had a similar experience where I was sitting on a rock out in the desert and I said to my friend who'd passed, I said, Derek, I want to see you. Like, I know that you're there. He used to call me his family, his brother told me he called me his ghost whisperer friend. And I said, I know that you were in contact, but because I'm so close to you, I don't, it's hard for me to know what's coming from my head or you
Yeah.
because I already know you. And I said, I just want to see you. And I meant like, I want to see an apparition of you.
Hmm.
And I'm sitting there on these rocks all by myself out on a hiking trail. And I said, I just want to see you. And I heard his voice say, you're looking at it, dum dum. Like everything was so beautiful. I wasn't in Sedona, but I live near Sedona. And it was like all these beautiful rocks. Like I said, I want to see your soul. I
Yeah.
want to see your soul, is what I said. And he goes, you're looking at it, dum dum. And he used to call me dum dum. But also, I knew I'm like, that wasn't my own thought. He was saying, and then he said, I'm in every tree, I'm in every rock, I'm in the
Oh,
wind, I'm in the sun. And it was like, I didn't think that. He told me that. It was so beautiful, but it can feel like your own thought.
yes,
And
absolutely.
that's what, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Like how are there other ways that you know when he's communicating with you other than that? Why would I say that?
Yes, usually I will hear him. I always, the best way that I can explain it was, and I think this is where I had quite the confusion, is that I don't know if it's from TV and media, but I thought when medium hears spirit, they're like, and I know some mediums very much
Yeah,
possible, but I thought they like hear them, like how
me
I'm
too.
talking to you.
Yep.
Threw me off for the longest time. And so then I started asking the mediums, how do you hear spirit? Like, explain it to me.
Hmm.
And the best way that I can explain it is that it's in my inside head voice,
Yep.
but it's his syntax.
Hmm.
It's the words he would use, like the spin of speech. it's just different. The dialect is different, even though it's still in what I would consider my inside head voice, it has a different dialect to it, if you will.
Yeah.
And it's taken a little bit, and then he actually, which I find quite interesting, teaches me, and then I in turn teach others how to do it. And one of the most, it was so simple, but it's probably one of the most powerful, neatest things that he's taught me to date was I was reading a book, and as I was reading this book, he was telling me read it out loud. And I was like, I don't want to read it out loud. It's like, just read it out loud. I'm like, why? He's like, no, in your head. Say the words on the page in your head. Like, say them. I'm like, okay. So in my head, I'm, reading the words. And he's like, that's what you sound like. Start
Wow.
paying attention. He goes, that's what he's get used to what you sound like. That's what you sound like. If that doesn't sound like you, anything else that's not that is not you. And I was like, this is the most, and it was so basic, but it really clicked from my brain to, so I did this little quote unquote test with the people in my group. I was like, this is what I said, say it in your head. It sounds silly, but do it. This is what I sound like. Now say, this is what you sound like, and have them answer. And you'll start to be able to learn to delineate between the two. And they'll play along with it, right? Because they know
Yeah.
we're learning. And he'll, usually tell me something sarcastic or joking when I do it, like, you're hot or something silly that I
Yeah.
know like I couldn't possibly make up that quick in the moment. Or I'll
Yeah.
ask a question that I know I don't have really an answer to.
Mhm.
I guess it's kind of a test, but it gets him to respond in such a way that I know that there's no way that I could possibly create that answer.
Right, and do you also feel physical sensations when he's around?
Yes. So I generally get, when I sense spirit, I get really cold. That's just, some
Mhm.
people get different feelings. I generally get very cold. And then when he's kind of very in my space, I always say it's almost like if you were to take like an ice pack and hold it away from the skin, but not actually touch it, but you can feel like that
Mhm.
coolness. That's kind of what it feels like when he's like behind me and stuff like that.
That's so interesting, it's true, not that's the other thing for people to know is that just because I feel something doesn't mean you're gonna feel the same sensation. For me, it's not cold, I call it spirit tingles, and it's usually I'm feeling it right now, which I know means he's here, but it goes down one side of my body most of the time, and sometimes it'll be in
Yes.
my hip, down my leg.
Okay.
Don't know why it's on my right side, it just happens to be there. I don't know if that's how they move in or if that's just my nervous system, how it responds to being my brain being stimulated in that way. It feels like there's like a head massager, like,
Yes. A little
just
bit tingle.
yeah, and everybody's different, and sometimes I don't always feel something. Sometimes it's more of a subtle thing. Um, Now day to day, what's your relationship with Chris like?
Wow. So we've had quite the progression. Obviously, with his passing, it was quite tragic. So we've had to really work through that. So I kind
Mhm.
of like to tell people it's not like this went from, it was quite traumatic. So we had
Yeah.
a lot to really work through, and we've sort of done that. So it's kind of to get to where we've gotten today. It's just taken a lot of work on both of our parts, but that connection was just stronger really than our pain, I guess I like to say.
Mhm.
And we actually renewed our vows across the veil in June, a year from his passing. We renewed our vows across the veil. Day to day, I do connect with him every day in meditation at a minimum. And then just obviously when I'm able to hear him throughout the day, we'll communicate. But I always at least take that time in the morning when you first wake up because you're still sort of in that like alpha brainwave state, and I don't really have to do a whole lot to put myself there, right? I can just pop some music in and have that connection with him sort of first thing when I wake up. And I always tell people like that 20 minutes can feel like we've spent an entire, couple days together in spirit time, where it's in earth time, it's really only been 20 minutes meditation, but we've gone to dinner and had a talk and had all of these experiences. So it's not, I always tell people kind of work with the time that you're given, but that has been really helpful to me as far as just carving that out for him every day to where if I don't do it, I can almost feel him like, come on, like he's waiting for it. He looks
Right.
forward to it. He looks forward to that time to connect. Not that we can't throughout the day, we can, but obviously we
Mhm.
just get busy and it gets a little bit challenging. So I definitely at least make that time in the morning and then, we kind of throughout the day.
So I'm thinking about the other side, right? Where you can be married to somebody and they can pass away and you can marry someone else.
Yep.
And people ask, but then when I go to the other side, who's going to be my husband? There is no, that's a man made, that's something we do here. We decide. That's a choice that we humans
Yep.
make to, I'm going to commit to monogamy, fidelity, whatever, sharing a home together. And what does that look like for you on the other side? Like, has he ever has he ever expressed to you, um, hey, eventually I'd like you to find someone in the flesh, or is it, do you not even go there with it at this point?
Well, after he kind of made them disappear early on, it's
Yes.
kind of an interesting reflection as to what did we really want and how did we want to move forward. And came to realize that that was more a societal thing that I felt I needed to do because people were telling me like
Yeah.
that you should move on. And once I removed that, this is the relationship that I want. This has always been my primary. And while it's not ideal, I have more unconditional love than most people have in their life. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. And so it's really kind of taken a change. As an example, my birthday was at the beginning of December, and he did more for me on that day than anyone has done in the flesh for me probably ever across the veil. So things like that, I got a facial through like a coupon through like Groupon, right? I went to see this facial woman and she was amazing. And she just happened to be really open with energy work and things like that. We just had a nice talk. She's like, if you come back, I'll give you, the same discount. I'm like, okay, great. So I go back the second time and I have this facial session, still goes great. We come to find out she has a whole long line of Christopher Johns and her family, unbeknownst to me.
Oh, wow.
And like 3 days later, she texts me out of the blue, hey, I want to offer you a complimentary facial for Christmas. And I just started crying because I said, I
Yeah.
know he's behind this. I know he's behind this. And I told my medium friend who's clairaudient, and she did not also realize that it was my birthday. I just mentioned about the facial. And she said, as soon as I tap into you, I'm hearing him say, happy birthday. I hope you enjoy the day. She goes, is your birthday soon? The lady scheduled it on my birthday. I walk in, mind you, she's basically a stranger to me. I've met
Yeah.
her twice, right? I walk into this room. She has red roses, a balloon, a card, and cupcakes for me, and said, "It's from your husband." And I was like,
Oh my God.
so I do the session, and she did some Reiki energy work, and I hear him in the corner. You can hear him banging on the walls sometimes.
Hmm.
But I didn't wanna say anything because I don't wanna freak her out and be like, "Hey, did you hear my dead but not dead husband in the corner over there?"
Yeah.
And at the end, I thanked her and was like, "Yeah, I think I felt him in the corner." And she's like, "Oh my god, you did too? I've heard him the whole day there before you came in." The whole thing was unbelievable, and then to treat myself, I had a full, medium session for myself that evening, and, the medium doesn't know anything about what transpired as far as like the roses, all of that. And he told her to tell me, so you liked the surprises? I told you I had surprises for you and that I'm resourceful.
Wow.
So that is sort of why he lives up to his name with Ghost with the Most. But he was very like that here. He was very, when he was not in his sad, depressive state, he was very extroverted, over the top, knowledgeable, teacher type, chatty Cathy type person. And he is kind of all over. He will come to my friends, mediums. If you can hear him and there's a connection to me, they'll be able to hear him most likely. And so
Yeah.
I've even had friends who are not mediums at all, who don't even believe in this, who through this journey was like, I don't know why you don't believe it sometimes, because now you got me believing it and I can hear your husband too.
Right. Yeah, I know what you mean. There's some spirits that can communicate really clearly where it's almost like I'll be like, "It's like they're just talking to me." I can just
Yes.
hear it's so I
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
exactly what you mean. It sounds crazy if you haven't had that experience, but, some are more quiet, some are I can feel that he has a lot of energy. And then has he shared with you, I'm sure he has, what he's doing over there? What's going on the other side?
Yeah, I ask all kinds of questions, and it's been
I would
really
too.
interesting. And one of them to your previous question was for him. I was really concerned with maintaining this relationship. I was like, what does that look like on the other side? I mean, we
Yeah.
kind of know what it looks like here. And his answer blew me away. He said, the marriage isn't like that here. He said, it's souls bound together across dimensions.
Mhm.
And I was like, whoa. And he said, that isn't that what we're doing? Like, isn't that why we're working on this? He's like, we're doing this for a reason. And I came to find out that as tragic as his passing is, that apparently that was part of the plan so that he could be on that side to get me to this point to awaken, and that we would be able to share this bond with others to make it to teach others that it's possible.
Right.
And so once I kind of had that understanding, it started making a lot of sense. And it's like, well, what are you doing over there? And one of the things that he says that he does is he helps counsel others who come in who cross over from suicide. So that's one thing that he's doing. And then the other is he is all over and everyone's stuff. If someone needs help with something, he will be there. My friends have had, where they've had things going on in their life, he's showed up to help them. He's kind of all over the place. I would say, like,
Yeah.
he's zipping around. I have people just come to me, "Hey, I heard Chris today, and he said," and it's just like this normal occurrence. And I'm like, what is happening? It doesn't even surprise me anymore because there's all these people like, he did this today and he did that. I'm like, sounds about right.
Yeah. And do you have an understanding of I always think of spirit as sort of like Santa Claus, where they can be in a million places at one time.
Yes.
And yet they do have these, from what I understand, sort of duties on the other side, or things like you said. Maybe they're teachers, maybe they help children, maybe they help people transition
Mhm.
who've transitioned a certain way, and yet they can still be with you like every minute and have this omniscient understanding of what you're doing day to day. And yet somehow mediums will say, well, they're not watching you like use the toilet or shower or do intimate things. But I think it's like they do know that stuff, but it just doesn't have the same sort of like taboo or whatever that it does here. It's like they're not judging it. It's not like
Right, right.
it
They just
because
don't care, but they're there, but they just
yeah,
not a thing. Yeah,
it's not a thing that they're focusing on or judging or feeling any feelings
correct.
about because I
Exactly.
know from having done many readings that often they just bring up these day-to-day things to let you know, "Oh, yeah, that like, I did a reading the other day and to validate his presence, because I said, "I have this guy here," I described him, she's like, "I think I know who it is," and I said, "Why did he say Cracker Jacks?" She said, "Because there's a box of Cracker Jacks sitting on my bed, and his picture's right next to it."
Oh,
It's a friend of hers, like, from when they were teenagers, and it was his way of just being like, "I see the Cracker Jacks, like, I see them sitting on your bed," or sometimes they'll tell me, "There's a leak in your roof," or "There was a leak in your roof last week," or "The gardener was there today." Just like these really mundane things to let you
yep,
know that they're there for everything, and yet he's still able to do all these spiritual things on the other side. Do you
yeah.
have I don't know, do you have an understanding of kind of what that looks like? Has he ever mentioned it, or do you have a feeling about it or anything?
I mean, I've kind of just like came to the understanding that they are just multidimensional, and our brains just it's kind of a harder concept for our brain
Yeah.
to understand, but it's actually given me a lot of comfort and understanding that everyone's like, "Oh, was he with you all the time?" Yes, where else would he be? Because he can be with me and he can be
Mhm.
doing all of the things, or at least I have noticed, I think their energy can, like, he's always here, but his energy can vary depending like what he's doing. So sometimes it's a little bit stronger, sometimes it's a little bit less strong. It's not that
Yeah.
he's not present, but it's just I think it's where he's funneling more of his
Mhm.
energetic self, depending what he's doing or working on.
That's well said.
That kind of
I like
thing.
that you said where he's funneling his energetic self. That really resonates with me a lot. And I know that there must be days that are still really difficult where you just want that touch. I guess I'm asking if you can sort of share what your grief looks like now,
Yeah.
because I know that you do have this beautiful relationship, but still, you're you don't have that warm body
Yeah.
and that kind of intimacy. So how would you describe the grief and what it
I,
looks
I
like?
mean, I will be very honest. I think that's one of the things that I try to share with people. You know, I know that there's other people who they've been able to, get out of grief relatively in an unscathed way. I have not. I'll be the first to admit, but I just think that that's part of my path in order to be able to teach others how to, I call it getting out of the hole. My grief has been quite terrible, if I'm honest about it. I mean, I've always been functionable in my grief, right? Like I don't spend days in bed and that kind of thing, but just the tragic raw emotion that comes out is almost debilitating at times. And he's aware of it, and he's even told me numerous times, I know that it's painful and I know that it hurts. And it really is just kind of like riding a wave. It will just take me under, engulf every feeling that I have to where I can't breathe. And then when I finally let it go, I feel better. I feel good again, right? And it's just like you just have to go. You just have to take a deep breath and go under and just let it happen. It's like the more you fight it, the worse it gets, right? I think we're taught to just get over it. And I think actually like Teal Swan, I think used a good example one time that, if you were physically hurt, people wouldn't expect you to get up and go start running in a couple of months if you were to have an accident where broke your bones and limbs. But with grief, we expect people, a couple of months in, get out there, get over it, pull yourself together. And it's not like that. I still grieve him quite frequently, but I think that's just part of it because when I'm connecting to him, if he were, and I kind of explain it in the fashion that even in meditation, I hysterically cry in meditation and it doesn't take away from the experience, but it's part of the experience. If he was to come through the door right now, that would elicit such an emotional response. I would be sobbing like, oh my God, it's you, right? That's that same feeling in meditation. I'm connecting with him. I'm being in his essence essentially. So it's extremely emotional response. So that's how I know that I'm really having that experience, that it is true. If it wasn't or I was making it up, it wouldn't be eliciting that type of emotional response.
Yeah.
Um, and so my grief is quite bad. It is definitely getting better, and it's just learning kind of how to just flow with it instead of fight it.
I appreciate that you said that. Grief is such an intensely painful feeling that a lot of people want to escape from it. And I'll just distract myself. And the problem is, the only way out is through. And I don't even mean to say that you're ever out of grief when you lose someone so close. It just morphs, it
Yeah,
changes. You
yeah,
learn to live alongside it, you learn to manage and cope. And then slowly you start to feel a sense of normalcy in your day to day, but it doesn't mean you're ever going to be out of grief about it.
exactly.
But you're able to move forward.
Exactly.
And but I think it's important to stress that part of healing from grief is allowing yourself to feel it, even though it's just the most overwhelming pain, but to cry if you can't, hopefully you can, because we're designed to cry for a reason, to
Yeah,
release these hormones that are helping us heal. And I think it's also important that you said that even though you have this beautiful soul connection, which is so magical, it doesn't mean you want him there to go on trips with and share life moments with and do all the things that you did before. So of course you're going to miss that part
yeah, it's very
of the
bittersweet,
relationship. I
very
can
bittersweet.
imagine. Also, in what ways has it made it easier for you?
I think in the sense that, right, I, I miss his physical essence, of course, but on the flip side to that, it can be freeing in a way, right? I always joke, I can take you anywhere. I'm
Yeah.
only paying for myself. I don't have to worry about you snoring. I can take the whole bed, right? There's just those little things of like freedom of not having to worry about that physical being in your space. It's like I get all of the good of him now, and I don't have much of the bad anymore. I mean, we've
Right.
had a little bit of tips with him in spirit, but for the most part, we've sorted out all of our most of our stuff, and we're at a good place. But it's still a relationship. It's still this marriage that we've created, and so it's still not perfect. We still, I'm like, I don't want to be here, and he's like, just finish it. We have eternity, and there's very much that kind of I want to say arguing, but it's very much that like, well, why am I the one that has to do this? And so we've had to kind of work through all of those things of why did this happen? Why am I the one that's left? And as it sort of evolved and developed, it's just turned into this really nice thing where I can focus more on myself. Whereas when he was here, his problems sort of overwhelmed me, where my energy was being funneled into him. And I didn't really get to focus on me because
Mhm.
I was focusing on him and the relationship. Now our relationship's based on my well-being, right? The better that I feel, the more we're going to be able to communicate, right? The better I feel, the easier communication is, all of those things. So it's been quite the shift from earthly problems and his problems to what do I need to do to feel better?
That's also beautiful. That's really important. I mean, this I've been in a long distance relationship for a couple of years, and I'm not comparing it. Please don't misinterpret that. But in but there's something important generally, regardless of whether it's a long distance, your person's not there, your person's past, and even when your person is there. There
Hmm.
is something really important to be learned, because I think this is an important thing to talk about, because no matter what, you still have to take care of yourself at the end of the day, because someone can love you right, but as you know, unfortunately, they can't always be there. They may die. They may not be able to be there physically present. And even within these great loves, we have to stay grounded in ourselves and take good and focus on self-care and focus on what we want to, and not lose ourselves in any relationship,
Yeah.
in spirit or otherwise. And I'm sorry that this is the way that you're having to practice that, but I I don't even want to say but, and I think it's also a really good practice generally. It's in fact, because I work with so many widows, I sometimes think, do I even want to have that kind of love? Because
Yeah.
look
Yeah.
at the price of love is grief when they're gone. And
Yeah.
it can be, I'd love to, I mean, I don't have a question. I just kind of would love to hear your thoughts on that, because it's such a complex thing, relationships, bonding, attachment, and also being able to hold your center
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
not become codependent.
Yep. Well, uh, everyone has their own belief system. Not here to say one way or another, but we are a classic twin flamey type
Yeah.
situation. We were either great or we were just terrible, and there was really little in between. I mean, we were obsessed with each other, or we had a restraining order. Right? That was
Mhm.
how it was, and so. What people don't realize is what they see now is it's still that passion over the top extra, like he's so extra, like how does he do all of these things for you? And it's like, but that's who he was as a person
Mhm.
here if you just stripped away the things that were difficult for him. So he's still very much that way, and we're just learning how to sort of mesh it together, you know what I mean?
Right.
um
Yeah.
the whole thing has just been somewhat of a mind-blowing experience, but we've had to just evolve our relationship to the point I've even had people here in a physical body basically say I hate to use the word jealous, but that they see how loving our relationship is, and it's almost like they have this sense of like, how can your relationship with your spirit be so good? And I'm like, but you have to understand what you're looking at, right? Look at the tragedy that we had to go through to get there. There's always a price for it, right? Great love, great pain kind of thing, and it does kind of tie together. And that's why I'm trying to show people it's not all good and it's not all bad. There's really both in it, and it's learning to mesh the two together. It's difficult. It's a difficult relationship, but I can't get away from that love. There's nothing I can do. Even if I was like, you know what, this isn't for me. I'm gonna wish, he'll be there, but I want to do my own path. He's half of my heart. There's not another person that it wouldn't be fair to them. I could probably make it work if I chose to, but that it just wouldn't be fair for that person because he is the other half of my heart. So we really had to just get to a place where we're just doing this. There really is no plan B. I'm gonna hear you. I'm gonna figure out how to communicate with you. And I've done and tried everything until I figured out that I was able to do it. There was nothing that I wasn't willing to. If you told me walk around with a cone on your head with antennas and chant something, I would have been willing to try it. There was nothing that I wasn't going to do to be connected to my husband. And
Right.
that tenacity has kind of just propelled us. And now he's trying to help funnel that energy back into me where I need it.
Right. And I also think it's important that people understand that no matter how you pass, you're still going to the same place.
Yep.
Um, People who take their lives go to the same place that everybody else does.
Yeah.
And and I'd also like to hear what you know about that from your communication with spirit.
Yeah.
About that, I do think that people have different sort of levels of vibration,
Mhm.
but it's not because of how they passed. It's just kind of it's different things. But I'd love to see what you think in terms of some people have more stuff to work out to kind of
Yeah.
and then, but it's my personal understanding from what I've experienced that there's no like, top you have to be perfect to get to this level or there's in my I don't believe that there's sin in that sense. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that was one of the first things when once he crossed that he tried to make very, very clear in his communication when this was before I could hear him myself. I was having my own readings done, and that was one of the first things that he was communicating to me was, he's not in hell, he's fine, he's all those things. But I found it very interesting that I don't think there's any type of punishment or anything like that. It's just you're just forced to sit in your own reflection of things and choices that you made. And for some people that takes a little bit longer to work through. It's not that anyone's forcing them or having them in a bad place or anything like that. You're just basically forced to look at your own stuff. And I do believe he did that, but it is my understanding that because I've been working with him and we've really worked on forgiving each other, right? Because I was no angel while he was here either. We had that sort of dynamic, and it has really helped his healing infinitely. I actually have readings from when he first passed to where the energy was like a wet blanket. He was it's he wasn't in hell or anything like that, but it was remorseful and it was heavy and it was tragic and it was full of emotions of anything and everything that it felt like he was sorting through, and rightfully so, right? I was too. And over the progression of like 19 months, he's almost like a different version of him. He is happy and he makes jokes and he's sarcastic and he makes the mediums laugh incessantly with things that he shares. It's very much lighthearted and we've kind of worked through that heavy element, and I just think that spirits a lot of times just don't get that opportunity because their earth person is not really connecting to him. And unfortunately, they have to just sit in a lot of that until their person crosses. Because if we're not communicating to them, how are you working through that? They have to just kind of do the best they can, but they don't have anyone really helping them heal and work through that. And so I think that our helping them heal has really, and my helping him heal has really helped transmute a lot of it on both of our sides.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I also yeah, it sounds to me like really whatever it doesn't like I'm sure that there are people who are like, "Oh, honey, one day you'll meet somebody." And I think whatever feels right to you.
Mhm.
And that's it, it's It's your relationship. You know what you need, and I know that he wouldn't hold you back. I can say that. Spirit would not force you into something that wasn't authentically right for you because they want the best for us, even if that means you do marry somebody else, because they don't care. It doesn't matter to them because you still have the connection that you have.
Right.
So, I don't know, I just feel like there are probably do you find that people sometimes say that to you or think, "Oh, you don't know what's best for you," or "This
Yeah.
is just grief," or whatever?
It's actually quite interesting. I think I got a lot of that at the beginning, and I
Yeah.
think that it has pretty much now completely
Right.
ceased for the simple fact that anyone that is actually in my realm that kind of witnesses the things that he does, our communication, all of the it's come to a point where you just can't really deny
Yeah.
the quote unquote evidence at this point. It to where they know I can't be making this up. I cannot there it would be impossible for me to make this level of stuff
Yeah.
up, that it is true and it is valid. And I think once people have seen that, they're like, okay, well, it might not be for me, but she's
Yeah,
clearly got something that has is working for her.
exactly.
And they've seen my grief get better and, all of those things shift to the point where they kind of just know this is my past. And
Mhm.
actually quite a lot of people have it. I think it's becoming more of a thing. We just didn't know that it was possible. So we did what everyone else told us was to move on because what other options we really weren't taught that this was even a possibility. I didn't even know that I always believed in spirit. I knew that there was an afterlife, but until it happens to you, you don't know what you don't know. And I
Yeah.
knew that the spirit world existed, but I had no idea that I could actually continue like on an ongoing day-to-day basis. I thought you went to a meeting, they said they were fine. That was it. You moved on with your life. I didn't know. This was a whole news to me. And then I found out there's entire groups of people doing this. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
And he made it very well known that he would like to continue this, and
Mhm.
that this is what we're supposed to be doing, is to be sharing it and teaching other people about how to communicate with their person. And people have sort of just kind of, I guess, defaulted into acceptance with it really to where thankfully I'm not too questioned about it anymore
Yeah.
because he is kind of so prominent, if you will.
Right, like you said, your friends hear from him and other people know, but the main thing is they can see that you're thriving in the best way you can despite your grief. It doesn't mean that you're not in grief, but that you are very sane and that this is what's working for you. So I love that. And I think that's another thing I wanted to impart just because you may not want to do that, doesn't mean, and until you've experienced it, like you said, you don't know what you don't know. Um, what kinds of things do you teach people when you work with them about ways that they can connect with their loved ones on the other side?
Yeah. So it's kind of the number one question, right? Every medium probably gets it.
Yeah.
How do you hear them? How do you know it's them? And I mean, obviously I think belief that you can even do it
Mhm.
is step one, because I didn't even know I could do it. I believed other people could, but it was like the belief in myself that I could do it. So that took a lot of adjustment on my part. So that's kind of the first piece with people, but then also even just I am very science based in the sense that I like to understand the science behind it. Like, how are we able to do this? And it needs to make sense to me. And so I kind of started digging into like the brainwave patterns and how is this really happening? And basically teaching people it's not some scary, weird concept. This isn't some, weird woo thing. We've been doing this since forever. It's basically like learning a language. We all have the ability to be bilingual. We all do, but some people were taught it very young and they're just naturally fluent. It comes like nothing. The rest of us, if I were to learn a second language, I would have to work at it a bit. I could
Yeah.
do it, but I have to just start with single words, and it's going to take a little bit of work on my part. Versus if, my parents had really worked with me when I was younger and it would have been much easier. It's kind of the same thing. We all are capable, just some are a little more naturally apt to do it. And some people just don't want to, right? And that's
Yeah.
perfectly fine. So just that ability and then getting used to your thoughts, like they're already communicating to you. They're already communicating. They're already giving you signs, feelings, sensations, words. We just are too busy to pay attention to it 99% of the time. Like we're getting the information. They're always there. So it's learning to just kind of sort through that. And everyone's like, I don't hear him. You do though. It's just you haven't been taught to slow your brain down enough to understand what you're giving, understand what you're getting. So that's a kind of a lot of what I do is work with people to understand the information that they're getting, how to slow their mind, how to kind of decipher what's their thoughts, what's their spirit thoughts. We do things with the binaural beats, which help different times that you should meditate, right? Like if you're not a morning person, then a lot of people have great results when they're falling into that dream space before they go to sleep. I'm a morning person. But some people are like, I can't meditate at all. Okay. Walking has been phenomenal. I will go on walks and put earbuds in, and I've had some of the best talks with him that are just as good in meditation walking because it's giving your physical body something to do, which has kind of learned that it'll free up some space in your brain to hear and feel their thoughts because as you're walking, it's giving your active mind something to do where you're not, making Walmart lists in your mind and things like that. So we just kind of work through basically a bunch of tools in the tool basket, and then it's trial and error, right? What works for you. We all intake information differently. We all receive it different. And it's kind of just finding out what's most helpful to you.
That's exactly that's almost word for word what I tell people. So I love that.
Good.
I agree with you. I would say everything that you just said, yes. That's it's so easy that people make it harder than it has to be. But it
Yes.
does involve getting rid of these everyday distractions to a degree. And yet sometimes something will slip in there anyway. And you can be busy and suddenly something hits you. But I think that's so important to let people know that it is really just about focus
Yeah.
and intention and listening and paying attention and not forcing, which is kind of the tough thing. It's like less forcing, more allowing, which can be kind of tricky because we want that answer. We want them
Mhm.
to speak to us and tell us everything we need to know. But it's interesting. And then also, I'd love to hear, I know you gave us some examples, but of signs, like things that you see. For example, I have this thing with my spirit guides I haven't shared with anyone because I'm like, they're going to think I'm crazy. But I say, Show me that you received my message." And I said, "And show me our sign." And our sign is a little rainbow that's like not a full rainbow, but I look at the sky and there's like a little patch of a rainbow in a cloud. It is astounding. I've gotten to the point where I'm like, this is crazy, where I'll speak to them
Oh,
and then I look up and I go, there it is. And then it'll sometimes just disappear. But I can't believe it. I'm like, that's crazy. So
yeah.
I would love to hear anything that other little signs that you get from him.
A little outrageous with his signs, but we've done the more common ones, the feathers, heart clouds. When he first passed, I don't think you can, it's not gonna show,
Yeah.
but we have
Yeah.
matching penguin
Oh,
tattoos.
that's so cute.
And when I think maybe 3 weeks after he passed away, I was taking my daughter to get ice cream, and then we were gonna go to the store. And I actually was scrolling through like some group reading about signs, and we pulled up to the store, and both my daughter and I just paused and stared at each other. The car that was parked in front of us, their license plate said Penguin on it, and
Oh, wow.
they don't make duplicates. They only make
Yeah.
one like per
Right.
entire state, so that it's not like a number or something. Like to actually see that on a license plate is sort of like the lotto. Like when's the last time? I've
I
never
know.
in my entire life seen the word penguin written out on a license plate.
Yeah. That's
um,
specific.
Stuff like that. The funniest sign the afterlife has jokes. They have jokes. Um, I had a reading, and she goes, "This is very funny. I hope I can say this," but she said he's gonna send you ladybirds and penis clouds, and I'm like, "Why?" And I thought it was a joke, and I laughed and thought it was cute. Thought it was.
Yeah.
Didn't think anything of it. 3 weeks later, I'm just going on a walk outside, and I look up and I'm like, no. And I took a picture of it and I was like, this is crazy. I took the picture of it, and then same thing, I had a session a few weeks after that, and she said, he's saying, "Who doesn't love a penis cloud?" And I was like, and I have it all documented. I have the picture,
Wow.
I have the clip from the medium saying it before I took the picture of the cloud. I
Yeah.
have the picture of the cloud, and then I have the clip from the second medium who was commenting on it as part of like my fun evidence.
Yeah. That's really specific.
Just, wild, wild stuff. He goes big, so he's like, "We're past the feathers, babe. We're past the feathers." But he talks through a candle. I have a candle, and I'll talk to him, and the flame will.
Hmm.
He can like he'll just make the flame move. So I've documented that. My dog, I have a Yorkie little dog, and he wasn't a fan of this dog in life because he's a licker and a high need little yap dog, right? And my dog can see him, and his urn is on the fireplace, and it's been 19 months now, and at least once a day he goes nuts at the fireplace and starts barking at it.
Wow.
And he is now communicated through various other people that you're, and he'll joke, "Your stupid dog sees me."
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
my dog can see him, so I've got evidence of that, all of those kinds of, I mean, really what I would consider quite quite wild
Yeah.
evidence, but
Thank you for sharing those. That's really cool. And basically, I know that you've said so much here that I know is really, and I hope will really help people to realize that you can have this just ongoing relationship. It might look different, but the relationship, the connection doesn't die, the body dies. And as we've said, it does not replace having that person walking this through this world with you. But what is it that you want people to know? Whatever comes to mind. I know it's a very broad question.
yeah, love just doesn't die. I wish if I had been taught what I know now when I was like a little kid, I think I it's almost perplexing to me because we put ourselves in such a state of suffering that didn't need to be this way. And
Mhm.
grief is one of the most painful, painful emotions. And how do we have just had a better understanding of how to deal with it, manage it, that they're not really just gone, our lives would be so different. And we are just in such a somewhat tragic place as a society, as a country, all of those things, especially like Western civilization, because we just, for religious reasons, whatever, we just weren't taught this, told about it, or that it was bad, or you can't do it, or whatnot. And I think that's starting to shift, but we're missing out on so much knowledge from them.
Yeah.
By we're just They have so much to teach us if we listen. I mean, he's just shared phenomenal things about like marriage across the veil, what he's doing, our soul purpose. I mean, just some really deep things that I would just be sitting there wallowing in my own pain and not having any understanding. And now I still have that pain, but I have a much higher level perspective of it, and sort of it's clicking with like the whys behind it, right? Which helps us get through a lot of that pain. I just want people to really know that while some people may choose this path, some might not, but to at least have it presented as an option that regardless of who crosses, you can maintain some level of connection. And it's kind of like anything. What you put into it, you're gonna get out of it. Like we get all upset at them. And as an example, I remember I had a session one time and the medium said he was fishing, and I didn't talk to him for like 2 days because I was so mad. Like, I'm paying bills and cleaning toilets and you're fishing, right?
Right.
But and now I'm happy for him. I mean, he should be fishing. That's it's part of being where he is, right? That's
Yeah.
part of it. But in that moment, that was a very human moment where I was like, it's just so not fair. Um, but it's just having him help me work through that and just letting people know what you put into it, just like any relationship, you're gonna get out of it. And unfortunately, they can't do all of the work. We create the phone line to them, right? We're the phone line, we're creating it. So we can't just expect them to constantly send incessant signs to us and then we're never reaching out to them. It's the more that we communicate to them, the more that they're going to communicate to you. And that's why I kind of get on such a grand magnitude, if you will, because he likes to joke with me because you're doing the work, right? I'm
Yeah.
putting the work into maintaining that connection and really to healing myself, which is the whole point of it.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I do have one more question though that I'm slipping in here.
Yeah.
What does he say our soul's purpose is?
I can't say for everyone. I just know a
Yeah.
lot of ours, is that apparently we've, been doing this for a little bit, so I've learned, and that this particular lifetime was a sort of meant for me to finish a lot of my lessons and to really figure out who I really am. And that he essentially, this is what I find interesting. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but as a newer medium, I think it's kind of coming out that suicide, not always, but it can be a viable exit point for certain souls.
Mhm.
It's not necessarily that they've deviated from their life plan. That's not the case with everyone, but there
Right.
are those instances where that was possibly a planned situation. So I sort of learned from my understanding that he got to a place where he was sort of done with his lessons, if you will, and chose to take that exit point because that was the only way that I could finish mine this time. And so while I hate that point of view, it really was quite eye-opening, right? Because he's basically sacrificed in a way to help me get through my stuff.
That's
And
the agreement that your souls had together. Yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah,
have
and
felt
so
that in certain readings that I don't say that to people.
a
I'm
lot.
allowing you to say it,
It's a lot, yeah.
but I don't say it where I know because I hear them tell me we had to do this because this person needed to learn I don't want to say self-sufficiency, but self-love without another person because I have some clients where it's codependent in life and codependent. I hate to use the word death, but they're still have a codependent relationship with their person on the other side. And unfortunately, as much as I hate it for them, part of it is this is the part where now you have to learn how to be by yourself, and that's a terrible thing. Like, I feel for them so deeply, and I don't wanna ever say that to them unless they ask, but I know I feel that too coming through from the other side very strongly
Yeah,
with
so
with
I think
some
that was
readings,
part
yeah.
of our path was to help other people with this, to
Yeah,
show people that we could do it because our bond is quite different. It is quite intense and magnified and all of those things. And I have not really I've now since met people who are similar to Chris and myself, but it wasn't something I didn't have any other reference point of people that had this connection to with this intensity. And I do believe that that is just part of our purpose in doing this is to show people that it is possible. And if we're not intentional and intense about it, people tend to not take it seriously, or that it's just something, or it's just some coping mechanism that I have. But because he's coming through like gangbusters, just constantly, like in such a profound way that people are really stepping back. As an example, the group that I run, I did health and nutrition prior to all of this, and it was just a fitness group that I had. It was just a fitness group that people had taken like a group fitness class of mine. And one day I was like, we're just going to turn it into like a spiritual mediumship group. And I told everyone about it, gave them the chance to remove themselves if that wasn't their thing, rightfully so. And like out of over 300 people, one person left. And
wow.
and so it's very interesting because all of these people are in it, but they don't necessarily have a reason to be in it,
Mhm.
if that makes sense. But they find it fascinating and interesting. And because at some point we're all going to experience loss. So it's planting that seed in their minds that there's something else going on, and it's planted that seed, which I do believe otherwise they would not have had that kind of exposure to.
Right. Yes, and just one thing I just feel a responsibility to say is that obviously when we talk about well, on this podcast, we talk a lot about the other side and how beautiful it is, and I just want to take responsibility because I said, whether you take your life or you don't, You're still gonna be in this beautiful place, obviously, but I have to say it, that doesn't mean that that's the best option, and, I think it's important also to say that while you will not be judged, you're here for a reason, and I know that depression is extraordinarily painful, and fortunately, there are better resources now, EMDR therapy, TMS therapy, certain medications, whatever you're going through, there are ways to help, and I know that from I have friends that have major depressive disorder, who have bipolar disorder, who have trauma, PTSD, and I
Mhm.
know that that's easy coming from me to say, "There's help, don't give up," but really, the thing is, from what I understand, and I'd love to hear anything you wanna say about it, is you're just gonna have to come back and do it again anyway. I mean, until you kind of get, it may be presented to you in a different way, but these lessons that we do have free will to exit,
Mhm.
and you're not gonna be punished, but I just really hope and encourage people to please not give up and to please try all the things that are available, because also the people that are left behind really are the ones who suffer
Yeah.
so deeply.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in my husband's case, he tried, all of those things. We had gotten him EDMR, we had gotten him medication. Um, he had just spent some time in a mental facility twice where he was thoroughly evaluated. But when you're very intelligent and you speak really, really well, you can talk your way out of anything.
Yeah,
And people can only help you to the extent that you're willing to share. And unfortunately, some stuff is just too deep and heavy. So hopefully people
yeah,
can get help. I think it's important for people to get help really early on. We wait till we're
mm,
way too far in it, and it's too much to unravel that level of emotion. And that's kind of where he got. As far as the suicide piece, I do believe certain souls have that as an exit point. Certain ones do not.
yeah,
So I think it just depends where they are. Is that a true exit point for them, or did they maybe just not stick it out in the way that they maybe should have? So I kind
mhm,
of think like anything, it's a very personalized scale. But I know from working with him personally that even though he's in a wonderful place, so I kind of compare it like even if you put me on an island with $1 million, a bag of puppies, and Santa Claus, it would be nice. But after a while, it still would be like, but my person still isn't physically here with me.
yeah,
And so I kind of feel like that's how they are, right? They are in this amazing space, but I'm still the other half of his heart. And unfortunately, a piece of me physically is still here. And so he still feels that disconnect as well. And I think that's just a piece we don't talk about from the spirit perspective, that even if they're in this great place, they still do feel that disconnect. They still feel that, and I can't imagine that it would be pleasant when I'm having a horrible grief bout for him to have to watch that
yeah,
repeatedly. I mean, that has to be, even though he's kind of sees that the end sort of justifies the means, it doesn't mean that it's pleasant for him. And I can't imagine that it would be difficult to watch that
yeah,
repeatedly. Just as much pain as I've been in, he's had to watch it all.
mhm,
So, everyone I guess has their own path, but it's quite difficult on all sides. And I do believe
yeah,
if it's truly not, if you truly, truly, truly don't believe that that is what you need to do to help yourself, then you should, try to stay and get the help that you need.
yeah, thank you. Well, Jennifer Foley, thank you so much for sharing so vulnerably. I'm so sorry for such a profound and terrible loss that you've endured and that everyone who loves Chris has endured. But thank you for turning your grief into helping other people and being of service to other people. I will have links below to
Okay.
your groups
Oh,
and how to work with you. And I just want to thank you again for showing up and sharing this message.
no, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. And of course, we love to always share our story, and hopefully we can be a source of inspiration that love doesn't die. It does continue.